following his plan out there in Vegas, huh? Do you remember when everybody in Las Vegas took like 5 minutes or so from rooting for their own team that they grew up watching hundreds, thousands miles away, and now have relocated in Vegas because that's what people do. And we're all excited and jacked up that the Raiders got Josh McDaniels, the mini hoodie. I don't know what the hell they were calling him out there in Vegas, but they were calling him a good coach at the very least. Finally, things would settle down with they got Devontae Adams. Did you know about that? Look at this Raiders team geared up to make a run, to make a push. What? This Raiders team is dog shit, and we want to take full advantage of it. So thank you. Thank you for joining me as we build a 3-leg baseline same game parlay over on DraftKings. And then we're going to supersize the shit out of this. And it's going to be Chiefs heavy because I don't trust that guy behind me. And I don't trust that team behind me. This is a bad combination. Not one that I want to win money with by any means. So we appreciate you hitting the thumbs up button and being a part of what's happening here, really subscribing to this gigantic, fastest growing sports betting community across the entire YouTube platform. How about that? Look, it's a parlay, folks. So I can drop this below 7.5, this key number here at 7, and move it to -5.5. In fact, if you wanted to play this straight, -150 is okay. I think this is the lowest I would go, paying that much at -150. But that's the first one right there. The Raiders are 1-4 against the spread in their last 5 division road games. They don't play well on the road, especially in this tough division. And look, the Chiefs are still a tough football team. Okay, Andy Reid, 6-1 straight up, 5-1-1 against the spread Monday Night Football. So not only are the Chiefs looking like they found something here, like the Chiefs have kind of resurfaced as that big squad that we know can get out there and truly score a ton on you, and that defense that can get after you, although you can run on them. I understand that. This is a great opportunity for the Chiefs to send a message that they're back. And that's what we want first here, to open up with the Chiefs -5.5. That's our first leg on this parlay. You can see each team total points first half. See how we can go all the way down here to total points. The next play is actually going to be not total points, but team touchdown props. I wanted to show you the difference here because what we're going to do is total touchdowns. All right. Or if you wanted to, you can live dangerously and go where I want to go, which is passing touchdowns. Now, why are we going 3+ here? Because I believe you can get 2 from Patrick Mahomes. Now, what does that mean? Somebody else could clearly and easily be throwing the football in the red zone on the goal line. How many times have you seen somebody not named Patrick Mahomes throw a touchdown? It's just
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the NFL Lineup Review Study Show. I'm Eric Lindquist, excited to be talking through all that was in Week 5. Hit that like button, subscribe button, and notification bell as we get going. We're sponsored by PrizePicks, our people. We absolutely love it over there. I've been having a blast. It was one place that I was profitable yesterday. You know where I wasn't? Adam was on this main slate, but you, my friend, welcome back to the green column in the NFL streets. A profitable weekend for Ship My Money DFS over on Twitter. That's Adam Scherer. How you doing, my dude?
Doing pretty well. Yeah, nothing big yesterday, but always feels good to at least make a little bit of money over the weekend, not just punt off 5 figures. So that felt good. Nice to be back to not losing at least.
Getting off the schneid. Well, neither of us had as good of a day as our producer Mike Lawrence. Shipped the $12 in the afternoon slate there for $5K. Shout out Tevin Coleman. He's one of the real ones, that's for sure. But wanted to give him a shout out right from the get-go here. We were talking about that before the show. Wanted to give him his due credit because $5K, off of $12. That's called ROI, folks. So well done by him. He's going to be getting us through everything that we have here on the old Fantasy Cruncher streets. But before we dive in, like we always do, going through all the exposures of the Millie from all of the people in-house here at Stokastic, how did you feel about yesterday's slate overall?
I thought that it was a slate that's really difficult to win just because Chalk did so well. Like I said to you before the show, my head-to-head lineup on the main slate outscored all 150 of my tournament lineups. And it's not like my tournament lineups were bad. Like I basically broke even in stuff. So it's just really difficult to win on those slates because your margin for error is smaller. But at the same time, like looking through my exposures this morning, there were plenty of spots where the field was heavy on guys and they didn't really do well. So I don't know. I thought it was kind of just a weird slate where like there was really condensed ownership in a decent amount of spots, but then like just not a lot going anywhere else. And some of those spots did well, some didn't. I thought it was just kind of an interesting slate. Obviously, Taysom Hill sort of ruined a lot of things, but
no. The Dallas Cowboys defense ruined my life yesterday. My life.
I was very surprised when I saw that. I had a lot of them on DraftKings. I didn't have a lot on FanDuel or Yahoo.
I was up mid four figures going into the afternoon because I had all the Austin Eckler and all the land. I had a bunch of New England defense. I had a bunch of things that just were set up, and I knew that it was going to go down. So once those 10 points hit for people, like it dropped to, just like low four figures. So I knew that was going to happen, but I was like, all right, if they put up 10, 12, 13, I'm going to survive because I have New England defense. I have Jacksonville, which didn't play well, or Houston in a couple spots, which didn't play all that well, but like serviceable. You get 8 or 10 in some certain spots and you feel okay about what you're running into. 90 seconds into the freaking afternoon, and I was drawing dead in the afternoon slate because all I did was play 49ers. They lost by 8-15 from the 49ers. And then in the main slate, I was screwed too.
Yeah, that like even having them, because I had like 27% on the main slate. I was like even with the field on the afternoon slate with 36% on DraftKings. But even then, it's just like it's still just annoying when the chalk defenses do that. Like clearly it wasn't bad for me, but it just it's still annoying.
Because I mean, Taysom Hill, it's not like Alvin Kamara had a bad game. Alvin Kamara was fantastic.
Yeah, he could have been better.
He was lower owned than I thought he was going to be. Same thing with Leonard Fournette. We'll get into that. Upsetting. Look at Mike Lawrence's picture as he left the Zoom room.
Yeah, I saw that.
That's pretty good. All right. Let's do this thing, shall we? We are doing it. Hit the like button, subscribe button, notification bell. I had to get a tiny bit of tilt out. We're obviously going to be tilting as we move along and make our way across, but let's do this. We're going to the Millie, y'all. And looking at the winner right off the bat, before we get into anything else here, 20 lineups, cashed 15 for over 1.1 million. That's a great opportunity if you can get it. A couple 2 and 5 enterers there in chest 28.99. Different chest, that's for sure. And this TD33 individual cashed 4 lineups for 56K. Looks pretty good here at the top. 2 150 maxers there. And then Brontosaurus Flex, who's very good at the old DFS, cashing 119 lineups, finishing in the top 10 there. But it's kind of just something I wanted to point out because I thought it was pretty interesting. Top 15. Oh, yeah, top 15. Cool. You know what I mean. Stop. He made a lot of money. He finished top 10 in terms of profit.
Don't forget to shout out friend of the program, Saul Goodman.
Friend of the program, Saul Goodman. There you go. W. Do we even have, as I'm looking at the total ownership and the fantasy points scored, does Taysom Hill even listed there? I don't see him.
He's third, 37.08. 0.1% owned.
This populated weird again for me. I don't know why this is happening, but I'm going to be going off of the screen here. Let's start with the highest owned plays here on the slate, shall we? I think that's a good way to do it. Yeah, had a 3-man screen because I was going to say Chris Godwin I knew was the most owned guy in the Millie. As I group it, is that who's at the top of your page right now?
Yeah, 27% Godwin, 23% Evans.
Okay, because it says James Robinson, Damian Harris. I have no idea what I'm looking at here right now. This is definitely incorrect on my end. So I'm just going to have Mike. You're going to have that screen up for me the entire time as we're talking through this because otherwise I can't do anything on my end. But let's talk through the Tampa Bay side, which I would call a disappointment outside of Leonard Fournette, which is beautiful because Leonard Fournette was the one guy on Live Before Lock. If you tuned in yesterday, I said, look, I don't know how to predict Kansas City nuking a team by 21, a negative game script, getting Rachaad White some reps, having him involved, maybe saving Leonard Fournette for a spot where you aren't like 95% in win probability. How did you feel about Uncle Lenny and the Tampa Bay Bucks yesterday?
Yeah, I still felt good about Fournette. I talked about it a bit in the morning. I thought people were kind of overblowing the Rachaad White workload from the week before, just from like a standpoint where I think you need to take a step back and think about things logically, which I know is difficult. Fournette was handling such a huge workload through the first like 3 weeks. And then week 4, you mentioned just it's a weird game against Kansas City anyway, but they kind of were just like having Rachaad White come in and just take over like entire drives. And then they would go back to Fournette. And it seemed like the opinion was sort of just like, oh, they're cutting White into Fournette. Like they were, but at the same time, you can't have Fournette play 90% of the snaps the entire season. Like the dude's going to die. So you... Like to me, it kind of just seemed like people were overreacting in that they were viewing it strictly through the lens of White is cutting into Fournette's workload instead of through the lens of like, we expected Fournette not to play 90 to 95% of snaps all season long anyway, so who cares? Like he was still going to get plenty of his work. So I didn't really view it as much of a negative as I think maybe some other people did. I thought he was still a really good play here. The price tag was really cheap. I had him in early slate cash. I had him in main slate cash. He was my second highest owned player in main slate tournaments. I loved getting to Fournette.
Yep, I loved getting to Fournette, and the field loved getting to Godwin and Mike Evans in a ridiculous way, which I have to say, I wasn't a huge fan of the Mike Evans 6,900. I thought that there were enough guys at the running back position. We'll get there too. The wide receiver position that had massive ceilings that you kind of wanted to get yourself to. Getting to Godwin, where he was sub 6K, he kind of fell into that Chris Olave and Tyler Lockett bucket where I just wanted to get off of all three of them in tournaments. I didn't really find the spot all that appealing going up against Lattimore for DK Metcalf either on the other side. And then not to look at cornerback wide receiver matchup too much, but just felt like New Orleans, a better defense. And then, of course, the game shot out anyway because Seattle's defense is an abomination. But Godwin, Mike Evans, the wide receiving core is there. You had some other very, very chalky guys there. Chris Olave, as I just said, at the top of it. And then Tyler Lockett did not end up popular at all, which is just wild to me.
Yeah, I'll say I kind of went the opposite approach to you there, where I didn't get to a lot of Mike Evans. At 6,900, and like you said, there were plenty of other ways to go. But those mid-range receivers, I did get to a lot of. I got around the field on Chris Godwin. I was well over the field on Tyler Lockett. I was over the field on Chris Olave, who bailed me out with that touchdown.
I hope he's okay, though, because I think he's a great wide receiver. It's just touchdown variance. Yay. Yet another thing that went well at the end of that slate for me.
Yeah, I didn't even realize it had happened. Like, I got the alert that he was hurt. And I was like, oh, shit, like, because I had seen, that he was tanking a bunch of pretty promising lineups. And then I just happened to see he had scored before he got hurt. I was like, okay, that's cool at least. But, so I ended up just going over the field pretty much on that range. And I think for me, it was just of it. Like, obviously, they were going to get ownership, but I didn't really think any of them were getting, like, problematic ownership. We had Lockett projected for 13% ownership. He came in around 13 or 14%. Godwin was projected for 16%. Olave 16%. All of those numbers just seemed reasonable to me, and I didn't think it was that difficult to build good lineups around that. So from a value standpoint, those guys ended up getting pushed up for me. Whereas Mike Evans for $1,000 more and also getting similar ownership, he was a spot where I didn't get to as much as the field did.
I just love your Kamara and Fournette ownership. We'll talk about that later too. We're going to talk about everything here. Other players that were very, very popular, Tom Brady ended up by far the most popular quarterback. And that was something that you could kind of see coming. We had him projected right around 14, 15%. And something I've constantly seen here is when you get like a mid-value quarterback, not the Josh Allens, the Jalen Hurts that might put a little bit of strain on other positions in your lineup, they end up more popular than what you think. If you knew it was 22% Brady going into this slate, I can guarantee you top players would have different opinions about how to handle that. You were basically exactly half the field. Then there's Alex who went up to 40% Tom Brady. I don't really know what to say because
Rinpack
Godwin
had
and Evans.
52.
What?
Rinpack had 52.
Is that a lot?
I'm glad to see he's back to playing his game.
Yes, I was gonna say, give in to the hate. What?
Have you seen his exposures?
Yes.
Basically,
I was saving that for later.
Okay.
We got to tease the people. We got to get there. Yeah. It rhymes with Schmarz and Schwentz, and it's going to be fun. But yeah, Tom Brady on this kind of a slate compared to the other QBs. I mean, he was nuclear popular. Would have gotten to more Josh Allen if I had known this coming in at the coin flip. Him and Jalen Hurts with identical ownership. Give me Josh Allen every single time in those kind of spots. But how'd you feel about Tom Brady in the quarterback position on Sunday?
So, I mean, Brady was nice because, one, he was cheap. And then, two, he just paired really well with like a lot of guys that you were going to play anyway, whether that's Godwin, Evans, Fournette, Otten as, a pay down option at tight end. So I think that probably bumped up Brady's ownership a bit as well. It's just that he correlated with like a lot of the really popular plays at pretty much every position. But at the same time, like you can get to those guys and just not have Tom Brady too. I typically don't really like playing quarterbacks that don't give you rushing upside. It's one thing to go to like a popular Jalen Hurts or a popular Josh Allen, but I think it's kind of a different thing to go to Tom Brady because obviously he still can have good games, but he's not entirely different than like other quarterbacks priced around him. Any quarterback can throw for 3 or 4 touchdowns in a given game. There's only a few that, that give you the same rushing touchdown equity that like a Josh Allen or a Jalen Hurts do. So that is something that makes a difference. And still, like I thought Brady was a good enough play. I mean, I played 10%. That would make him one of my higher owned quarterbacks, I think. He clearly paired well with Godwin, paired well with just a lot of Tampa Bay guys. So I thought Brady was a good play. It wasn't a spot where I was going to take on all of that ownership, though. I was perfectly fine getting to individual Tampa Bay passing game pieces or Leonard Fournette and not having Brady.
Yeah, it felt like getting to Fournette was going to be the path that I took. It's the path I took. I felt pretty good about my lineups and Cowboys defense, you sons of bitches. Look at this. Look at this. The third most popular play on the entire slate was a defense. I get it. The Rams looked bad, and San Francisco has an unbelievable pass rush. They ended up blitzing a lot, actually, more than I expected in that Rams game, and ended up getting home, showed how bad that Rams offensive line can be. But $2,500 Cowboys defense, 23%. What in the world? I feel like this is like the 35th time that I've brought this up on these shows where it's a spot and you have to figure out what to do with it. But I thought it was an automatic pull the trigger, get less than the field. Once again, lots of other defenses, including the 49ers, are paying up for it. If you were playing cash, you were playing Cowboys defense, and there was no way around it. But what was your thought process, Ship, in getting over the field on the Cowboys defense? Because I'm mad at you.
I don't know. I just click buttons and whatever happens, happens.
Well, that's a great piece of analysis. Thank you. We can move on with our lives.
They did end up twice as popular as they were projected.
Yes, they did.
But I'm guessing that had something to do with it. I think if the buttons I was clicking had them at 22% ownership, I probably would have gotten less. But it appears they were projected for about 10 to 11, so that probably played a pretty big role. I mean, they were obviously a good value, perfectly fine spot against the Rams, really, really cheap. I think that ownership gap probably played a pretty big role in why I got to them.
Matt Ruley fired.
Yeah, good.
Free Christian McCaffrey, free DJ Moore. Actually, no. Can they just fire Baker Mayfield? That'd be the ideal scenario.
I mean, I'm still not convinced Mayfield's bad.
You aren't?
I think Matt Rule is absolutely awful. Like, I haven't seen a lot of Panthers this year, but I do know that when I've seen them, basically when they get behind and they're in like their 4-minute offense and it's just Matt Rule not being able to screw things up and Baker not having to overthink things, like he plays well. And then you get back to the Panthers doing what they, for whatever reason, want to do, and it's just an abomination.
Sam Darnold's the answer.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also just biased because I have a ton of Baker in best ball.
Oh, you do? Okay.
And DJ Moore and Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah, as you should.
I wanted to touch on one thing in chat because, and I know like it's not gonna sound useful, but I think it is. Like I feel like I mention it like every morning on the show with Josh when people start asking like really specific questions about defenses. AJFL 2022 said, had so much Lockett, but wimped out last minute thinking Saints D would ball. I thought Saints defend pass well, so faded Lockett. I need to study more variables. honestly, you probably need to study less variables. Like
that.
Projections, like obviously there's spots, you mentioned the cornerback wide receiver thing, which I don't care about. But
so I'll finish out. You go and then I'll finish.
Okay, so projections like factor in things, right? It's not just saying like if you look at Tyler Lockett's projection and it's whatever it is, let's say it's 20 points. I don't know what it was. It's not like an agnostic projection. It's not saying this is what he would score in a neutral matchup, not knowing what team he's playing, not factoring in any of that stuff. Like it's factoring things into the projection. So if you're going to look at a projection for a player and say, yeah, but the matchup stuff, you're kind of just double counting the matchup, because if the matchup weren't tough, he would be projected higher. So that's already being accounted for. Then you get to and you had mentioned it, the wide receiver cornerback thing. That's something where like maybe you can put some stock into it if you want, because it makes some sense. But the issue there is you also have the sliding scale between projection and ownership. Like looking at DK Metcalf yesterday, for example, because that's the one where you used the Lattimore, example. DK Metcalf was 3% owned. Yep. If you're going to give me DK Metcalf at 3% owned, I don't care who's covering him, because he still has the ability to make big plays, even if it's less likely than it would be if Marshawn Lattimore weren't defending him. So really what ends up happening, I think, when you focus too much on what defenses do well or who's covering who or whatever, is you just end up double counting things and not correctly approaching the situation, factoring in all the different variables, like how popular is he going to be? How well does, isn't that like he's worse without Dak Prescott? Because clearly, but he's priced different. So like if you just focus too much on actual football stuff, you end up missing the things that matter in DFS, like ownership and salary mainly.
Yeah. This is what I was going to add to it. Who had the first touchdown of the game yesterday?
DK.
And DK did 50-yard touchdown pass, and adjustments were then made. And you could watch them happening if you were watching that game. Go back and see how they basically went into certain zone coverages. They doubled DK in some spots. The two throws that Geno Smith made on both of those Tyler Lockett touchdowns were absurd. That second one especially was put into such a small window and such a small spot for success. And Lockett made an unbelievable catch where a lot of wide receivers probably also don't convert that. He made an incredible play. But what I'm getting at is that don't let the results of what happened dictate how well you played DFS that week.
Yeah, that's also completely true.
That's for me the best utility of this show isn't to go here. Like I want to glorify when somebody has a great week, when somebody binks, when we have guys with Stokastic. That is the goal. And sometimes I don't care whether or not, I want everybody to get up there to the top. But I feel like even though this was we've had 5 weeks now, main slates, I've been profitable on 2 of the 5. I lost money yesterday, but I feel like by far my lineups were better yesterday than any other week by a landslide. It may be because my wife was in New York and I had plenty of time to research the slate and make lineups. But for the most part, I'm very happy about my exposures and how I put lineups together and the thought process and the construction. It just I lost money. So such is life.
Yeah. And back to my point, I guess, to kind of like sum it up, there's so much NFL DFS content. And especially during the week, so much of it is like breaking down individual matchups and whatever. The thing you have to keep in mind when you're watching that is basically what analysts are doing on those shows is contextualizing projections.
Yes.
So again, you don't want to look at Tyler Lockett's projection and then say, oh, well, this person said it's a tough matchup though, so I'm going to knock him down. Like he would just project better if it weren't a tough matchup. So like, that's the thing you have to keep in mind. And it's why I personally don't do the shows during the week, is because it would screw me up. Like it messes up my thought process, like talking about it. Cause then I end up falling into those traps that I'm talking about right now, where I'm like, oh, I just said that it's a really tough spot for this guy, so I don't want to play him. Like you have to keep in mind that people are just contextualizing the projections. And I know I do this a lot in basketball and baseball, where it's like, oh, this is a really, really tough spot for XYZ reason. And then it's like, oh, well, I'm going to play a lot of him because he's low owned and he's cheap. You have to remember that DFS is just a totally different game than predicting what the most likely thing to happen on a football field is.
I love that. Guys, hit the like button, subscribe button, notification bell goes a long way for us here. We're going to continue going with some of these popular plays, but first, make sure you're checking out OddsShopper. OddsShopper is our partner site here, our sister site, if you will, here at Stokastic. Oddshopper.com. You have the opportunity to get free bets every single day just by signing up with your email. You simply put in your email and you get an opportunity to see expected win percentages, expected ROIs on bets. So if you're looking at Monday Night Football tonight, head to oddshopper.com. Take advantage of all that is to offer over there right now. Check it out for yourself. You'll really, really enjoy it. Doing a lot of great content on the YouTube channel over at OddsShopper as well. So be checking that out as well. I'm going to be shooting a prize picks video for Monday Night Football. Maybe another good one on tap for tonight. Who knows? Who knows? All I know is Thursday is going to be awful because your terrible Commanders team is playing the Bears. And why? Why did Amazon sign up for that?
I have no idea. I mean, at least the Commanders will throw the ball. The Bears will not.
No, they will not. Carson Wentz going through some of his issues. That'll be a separate conversation when we get to
I have an entire.
You have an entire thing planned?
No, I end up the confirmation bias around Carson Wentz as a Commanders fan just pisses me off on Twitter. So I don't think he's like the answer. I don't think he's very good, whatever. I'm perfectly fine even. I know Matthew Berry tweeted yesterday, just put Sam Howell in, see what he can do. I'm even fine with that because this team sucks. They're not going anywhere. I don't care. See what Sam Howell is. But I know Warren Sharp did it yesterday. He tweets out the Carson Wentz interception at the goal line at the end of the game. Whatever. It was a horrible last possession. He tried to turn it over a couple of times, but you tweet it out and it's just see, he's doing it again. I told you he sucked, blah, blah. He threw for 360 yards, had 2 dimes on deep balls to De'Ami Brown for touchdowns. But people are just cherry picking these individual things, or they're tweeting out, how Wentz's stats in whatever category are bad, but he's getting destroyed because their O-line is awful. So yeah, of course his yards per attempt is low. He doesn't have time to do anything but check it down, or he's getting hit as he throws. The whole thing just is really frustrating because it's just everybody came into the season being Carson Wentz sucks, and then the team as a whole sucks, and it's just I'm going to point out how right I was that Carson Wentz is terrible.
Well, he also was missing his best skill position player. That doesn't help. Jahan Dotson is the best.
Oh, I was going to say, do you mean because Terry McLaurin has disappeared off the face of the earth?
Who's Terry McLaurin?
Yeah, don't know. But yeah, he was also missing John Dotson. Although, De'Ami Brown looked great. Or Wentz made De'Ami Brown look great.
Why in God's green earth were Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson 17 and 18% owned, respectively, in the Millie?
Lions.
I get it, but I also don't.
Yeah, I obviously thought it was a little bit high. That was 2 spots. They were 2 of the guys that when I looked at the field's exposures today, so I wasn't really sure how I felt about how I played yesterday's slate because I was heavy on some pretty chalky guys. But then today when I looked at overall exposures, I was pretty happy with it because I was overweight on some of those receivers we talked about, but I was under on Tom Brady. I was under on Damian Harris. I was under on Ramondre Stevenson. There were a lot of popular plays that I just didn't get to, so it made me feel better about how I played. I thought they were both reasonable plays. Obviously, they were going to cut into each other's workload a little bit, but there was certainly the upside for one of them just to take over. I thought it was a pretty volatile spot. Typically, though, I prefer those spots when the field isn't going there. If 30% combined of the field is going to be on the 2 running backs where you're all right, they might split carries or one of them might handle the bulk of the workload. I don't really know. I'd prefer you're talking about the field avoiding them because they're scared to get there as opposed to them basically being owned at a percentage where you need them to be the guy that dominates the backfield.
James Robinson, his ownership was out of control, but I can tell you exactly who it was and why it was spiked the way that it was. Also facing Houston, that'll do it for you for sure. But yeah, I will say, I think the biggest mistake that I probably made on yesterday's slate, and this is one of the reasons that I saw my winnings go from, a nice number to negative number, was Jeff Wilson. Can you talk me through the thought process? Because you had 30% of him. I thought that there were good running back plays throughout the board, but I saw the involvement of Christian McCaffrey in the second half, and I just kind of assumed we were going to get some more of that, and I just made a massive overweight stand to him. He ended up 2%, and I had north of 20%, and I would do that a million times over again. It just Christian McCaffrey nuked the first half too, and then only finished with 23.4 after having 20 in the first half. Matt Rule deserved to get fired, so I'm very happy with this. But that was my big stand yesterday, and all of a sudden Jeff Wilson beats him straight up after I don't know. Talk me through the process of him, Ramondre Stevenson, Breece Hall, who I loved comparatively. Talk me through these low 5K running backs.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of upside there. And I think that's sort of what it came down to, too, is when you look at the projected ownership, it was pretty similar, where you have 13% going to Breece Hall. You had 14 or 15% going to Jeff Wilson, 14% to Stevenson, 13% to Harris. I think I just had Wilson projected. I know I had Wilson projected a bit better than those guys. Breece Hall, I think I did as well. I came in around the field on him, but I know I played him in cash. Obviously, just getting a ton of
Cyclones.
I forgot about that. Getting a ton of receiving work. So that was one thing. So Jeff Wilson just projected better for me. He was really cheap. I played him in cash too. He projected really, really well. I was happy to get over the field there if he's just going to get similar ownership to other guys in that range that didn't project quite as well. Breece Hall, I think, his workload was trending in the right direction. He's been very involved as a pass catcher. He ran really bad yesterday too in terms of fantasy production. Like, he should have could have absolutely annihilated that slate. Michael Carter, 2 1-yard rushing touchdowns, one of them coming after a 79-yard pass to Breece Hall. So yeah, it could have just been an absolutely massive game. But yeah, Wilson just projected like the best for me out of that group. So that's why I ended up with so much more of him. As far as McCaffrey goes, I didn't have quite as much as you. I had like 11%, but he was one where he came up on the show with Josh yesterday too. And somebody in chat said something along the lines of, when are you guys going to stop trying to make the McCaffrey breakout game happen? Which like really confused me, because I'm pretty sure the McCaffrey breakout game happened like 3 or 4 years ago and hasn't stopped since. But like, even looking at his numbers this year, to me, they're encouraging. He's playing on this offense that is absolute dog shit and can't move the ball, and he still scored. Last week he had 26 something points. Yesterday he had 23 or whatever. Like, he's still being involved, and you just haven't seen that massive like slate winning game where you have to have him, but it's there. Like, the opportunities are still there. I don't know. I keep, if McCaffrey's just not going to be rostered every week, I'm going to keep getting there.
I'm with you. He was my big stand. Talked about the thought process there. The process. I don't know. That's stupid. He was 2% in the Millie. 2%. I mean, I played mini max, $3, $9, did all that stuff, not the Millie, but like legitimately, I would do that a million times over. Felt good. Let's group by value before we go to fantasy points, because I think we know a lot of the people who group fantasy points, but I do want to point out one thing.
The number one value play being the Cowboys. I love it too. Had to, sorry.
Diami Brown, Rinpack had 22% of him.
Did he really? What the hell?
He
I hadn't seen that.
0.3% owned. Rinpack is from the future and played 22%. Diami Brown.
That's a play.
Why is he just so awesome? Like, I'm glad that we're back to Rinpack things, because he's by far the best guy to break down these lineups on the shows, because he's going to have one good week out of 18 and it's going to pay for everything. But he's going to have some insane stuff like this. I mean, 22% Diami Brown is outrageous and awesome to look at. I just wanted to point it out.
Yeah, it looks a lot cooler than my 17% Marquez Callaway.
Sure does. Nobody had Taysom Hill, because you shouldn't have had Taysom Hill. Patriots defense. I mean, they were facing the Lions. We should have. How did they not beat the Cowboys defense? It's just so tilting. 25% of the field getting there, just pain and suffering. Let's now go over to the fantasy point column, because Josh Allen, he was your QB1. He's going to be QB1 a lot over the course of a season. He's very, very good. He's too cheap. 8,200 is too cheap for him. 8,100 is probably too cheap for Jalen Hurts as well. But Austin Eckler, that was my big play as well. Him and McCaffrey, those were the two guys I paid up for everywhere. I don't really know, because I had 0 Jeff Wilson, and so that ended up being the dagger. He ended up getting there in a meaningful way. I didn't really hit on a lot of wide receivers, I suppose, as well. But Austin Eckler in this Chargers team, Rinpack, 26% of it, loved it. You were about at the field on him there. And then Gabe Davis, that was the nuke of the slate. You paired Gabe with Josh Allen, and you won tournaments. One, how do you look at a guy who has 2 catches for a zillion yards and 2 touchdowns? And then how do you kind of deal with it next week when you know Kansas City? Yes, everybody, if you haven't seen the schedule yet, Kansas City is on the horizon for next week, and Gabe Davis could end up doubly owned.
I mean, I just kind of take next week as its own thing. Like he's gonna fit into lineups in some way. Like, I mean, like everything. I'm never looking at one individual player and their ownership or anything like that. So like,
totally.
I can't say like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna play a ton of Gabe Davis, or I'm not gonna play Gabe Davis or whatever. Like, it kind of just depends how other ownership on the slate plays out and how he looks.
I was just going to say that I can guarantee you Gabe Davis is going to be chalkier than had he not had 35 fantasy points.
That is for sure true.
There you go. That's more of the conversation piece. It's just, I'm not going to think about it too much either. It is outrageous. Ship my money. It's not showing on rewind. Try refreshing it. Maybe do that quick. Mike.
Yeah, I'm missing like half of the value, guys. I'm just trying to refresh now.
Yep, I ended up refreshing it and I ended up snagging everything. And I know that it's right now because I was cross-referencing it with my CSV. So that made it easy to take a look at. We moved down the board in terms of fantasy points, and Justin Jefferson, yay, he's very good at football. Tyler Lockett, that hurt me a lot, having him get there in such a meaningful way. Cooper Kupp, he's going to be very, very good constantly. And I like that you were overweight to him. Osmo was way overweight to him. I mean, are we going to get to a point where we're going to be playing Cooper Kupp with the defense on the other side? Because this is just starting to get wild. Like, if you watch those first 3 plays from scrimmage, it went out route to Cooper Kupp, out route to Cooper Kupp, and scoop and score Cowboys touchdown. And then I was like, all right, they're both going to get there today. That's good to know. Cooper Kupp, expensive wide receiver. If you can afford him, you play him every week, correct?
Yeah, and I had actually kind of been thinking about that point, the defense point yesterday. Well, it specifically actually came up for me on the show with Josh, talking about cash games and talking about Tyler Higbee and the Cowboys defense. And I decided to just go ahead and do it for similar reasons that you could with Kupp, especially on full point PPR. Like Higbee and obviously Kupp just dominate targets so much in that offense that you can get a big game from Cooper Kupp without him even getting into the end zone. Or if he does get into the end zone once, who cares? It doesn't hurt your defense that much anyway. On a full slate, I'm still typically just not going to do that because I don't really need to. Like, I would still just rather not have a defense with Cooper Kupp. But him specifically, I think you could make the case, especially on DraftKings where it's full PPR, that like he's just going to get 20 targets. He can get 150 yards and not even score and be one of the best receiving options and not score. So you could, I think, start doing that. I probably won't.
Okay. No, I just thought it was funny. It's not something I'm going to actually do, but it's more of like there's viability to such a thing in a way that it hasn't existed in other places for a while.
Yeah, like it's perfectly fine. It's just like I would still just rather have a different defense, but he's going to get there plenty of the time where he barely hurts the opposing defense.
I think the only time I can rationally remember doing it, and in cash games, I think it happens more than at any other time by far. Like in tournaments, it's something you pretty much never do. But I think it was like a 5 or 6 game, maybe it was a Thanksgiving slate or something. Michael Thomas was on it, and I was like, you should play Michael Thomas and play the defense on the other side. Back in the Drew Brees days, it was something like that, but not something you should logically ever be thinking about. But welcome to the time where you can actually probably consider it for the first time ever and justify it. But let's talk late swapping, or not late swapping. Let's talk late news, if you will. Isaiah McKenzie, gone, wiped from the face of the earth. Khalil Shakir, if you played in the $33 5 max like I did, or if you played in $100 like single entry, Khalil Shakir was north of 15, even 18% in some of those spots. You get in these weaker fields, which is what I'm going to call something like a Millie Maker, where you get more quote unquote casual money. And Khalil Shakir was not popular whatsoever. I'm curious what your thought process was with him coming in late as the only real value option. There was nobody sub 4K that I thought was in play outside of a Khalil Shakir. We saw the Colts jam him. We saw the winner jam him at 30%. You got right around the field at 8.7%, which theoretically would have been double the field or right around what his projection would have been. He closed with 7.3% ownership projection here at Stokastic. But what was your thought process when you saw that news come across for a quarterback people wanted to get to in Josh Allen?
Yeah, I mean, there was obviously upside. You're talking about a $3,200 receiver that is going to at least be on the field. Clearly, you expect him to be behind Diggs and Davis in terms of targets, but he's going to be on the field. He's cheap. The other nice thing about him was that's a tough stack to get to salary-wise because Allen's expensive, Diggs is expensive, Davis is mid-range in terms of salary. So Shakir opens that up for you too, so that made some sense. I would have gotten to more if I was getting to more of the Bills in general, but I thought the ownership pretty much was where it should be on them, so I ended up around the field on most of their guys, but I thought that was a spot that just made a lot of sense because, like you said, there wasn't a lot of value options at any position that looked good. Now you're getting a $3,200 guy that is going to be on the field for the Bills, certainly has a high ceiling there. The other thing that I probably would have gotten more, except for I like the mid-range receiving so much, I didn't really need to pay down to Shakir all that much outside of Bill's stacks, but it definitely opened up a lot and was a pretty useful piece.
Tight end. Last thing to talk about in terms of fantasy points. There was no Mark Andrews auto freebie, click his name and get fantasy points. There was no Travis Kelce. TJ Hawkinson was facing New England with Amon-Ra St. Brown back on a snap count. How did you feel about tight end yesterday coming into the slate? And is there anything that you would have changed? Because it was just kind of a relevant position in terms of, Dallas Goedert had the most fantasy points from somebody. Nobody went completely nuts. So I just want to know your thought process about how you went about playing tight ends yesterday before we move on.
So I played tight end the way that I would really like to play tight end, as opposed to the defense thing where I played the most popular defense in a third of my lineups.
Truly hate you.
So tight end yesterday I thought was pretty clear from a cash standpoint. Like, it's Tyler Higbee. If you can't get to Higbee for whatever reason, then you go down to like Kate Otten, and that's pretty much what you're doing in cash. In tournaments, I thought it was a lot more interesting because, yeah, Tyler Higbee projected really well. Kate Otten was cheap and opened up a lot of stuff, but they're going to get ownership and they have a similar range of outcomes to a lot of guys around them. So for one, I think it was a spot where you could use them with your quarterback. For example, I ended up with a lot of Juwan Johnson just because, again, I was playing a lot of Andy Dalton. I had a lot of Olave. I had a lot of Kamara. I just had the Saints offense. So that bumps up Juwan Johnson, but also he was 2% owned. He's not great. You don't expect a lot out of him. There was a conversation on Twitter yesterday because Saul Goodman played him in his lineup that came 9th in the Millie, and somebody commented on playing a tight end without a ceiling, which it's like becoming one of my biggest pet peeves this football season because it's become like the thing now is people look at individual players and say like, oh, they don't have a ceiling. Pretty much anybody, like they don't have a ceiling for tournaments. Pretty much anybody that you would ever get to from a medium projection standpoint has a ceiling in tournaments. Like, this idea that people can't just fall into the end zone twice is absurd, and I don't know where it's coming from, but pretty much anybody that would ever show up in your lineups in like as an individual has a ceiling, especially when you're talking about cheap guys like this, like cheap tight ends, Juwan Johnson, John Bates. Yeah, the most likely scenario is not that they do anything that really helps you, but they're cheap enough that it's opening up other stuff in your lineup, and then touchdowns are really volatile, and there's no reason that they can't get 2 catches for 12 yards and 2 touchdowns, and that's really, really good. So I think the individual focus on ceilings, quote unquote, is a mistake that people are making. I don't really know why, but that's kind of an aside. But at tight end, there was just so much volatility there where I kind of just, for the most part, wanted to be either around the field on most guys or getting overweight on guys that weren't popular, in this case Johnson and Bates, getting away from a lot of the popular guys. I ended up with like a third of the field on Higbee, basically no Hawkinson, basically no Njoku. Had a lot of Goddard, but I also played a good amount of Jalen Hurts, so that's why. It was just a really volatile position where I just kind of didn't want to be with the field.
All right, well, guys, hit that.
Field, I should say.
Well, or over the field. I got it. Yeah, tight end, just kind of the last spot we hadn't talked about. Talked about running back, wide receiver, quarterback. Got to all the highest value plays, ownership plays. We're going to go into individual exposures next. But first, Prize Picks. They are the sponsor of our beautiful show here, being able to allow us to line up rewind over at DraftKings, look at all the things that people did, look at some trends, look at what we can learn going into next week's run of football games. But Prize Picks is the best spot you can possibly go play any of your prop exposure. No doubt about it. And here's why. You can up to 10x your money. And then on Fridays, they started doing these Flex Fridays where you can up to 15x your money. A lot of opportunities to play across multiple sports. And with NBA is starting up here. Was it next week? Next Tuesday? Next Tuesday?
Like that, yeah.
Oh, baby, it's going to be wild.
Hockey
you can play
starts on
across multiple. What?
Hockey starts on Wednesday.
Oh my God. I just can't wait. It's going to be beautiful. You want to play across multiple sports, NHL props. If you want to play NBA props, if you want to play NFL props, you can combine them easily and efficiently over at Prize Picks. You're simply picking 2, 3, 4, or 5 player props together, and you get up to 10x your money doing so. And if you play 5 of them together, 5 of the props together, you can still 2x your money by getting 4 out of 5, and you can still get almost half your money back by going 3 of 5. So as opposed to a traditional sports book where you're going to get absolutely blasted for getting 4 of 5, you're going to lose every single time. You go 4 of 5 there, you're going to double your money. And that is a lot of fun. Makes Prize Picks the preferred place. You can put correlated plays together, like for a Monday Night Football spot, like I'm going to be doing tonight. So take advantage of the Prize Picks board right now. Download the app over at the Apple Store, at Google Play. Make sure you get those together for Monday Night Football. We got playoff baseball starting on Tuesday. We've got hockey Wednesday. We've got NBA preseason if you guys want to fire that up. Esports, so many great offerings. Check out Prize Picks right now and use promo code Stokastic when you do it, up to a $100 first match deposit bonus. So you deposit 20, you'll get 20. Deposit 50, you'll get 50, so on and so forth. Get up to $100 there. So check them out. Prize Picks, thank you so much to them for the sponsorship of our show. Awesemo was all in on Tampa Bay in a very meaningful way. Chris Godwin, Tom Brady, Leonard Fournette, his 3 highest owned, all over 50% of those guys. That is a very hefty, aggressive stand on a pretty chalky situation. The Cowboys D, he slammed, so he's better than me. That was already confirmed. There was no question in DFS terms. He's the GOAT. Drake London, he had a ton as a bring back. I will say Drake London hit sub 8% ownership really surprised me. No Kyle Pitts there. 38.4% as the run back. If you're playing a lot of that Tampa Bay game, you got to hope you get something to come across from the Atlanta side. It ended up being Zacchaeus, who was a wee little man, and a wee little man was he. All you churchgoers, you know what I'm talking about. Drake London, how'd you feel about him, and how do you feel about Alex's exposures at the top there?
I thought he was a good play because he was going to fall a little bit behind that Godwin, Lockett, Olave tier, and the opportunities should be there for the big game. No Kyle Pitts. It's always kind of difficult when you get a situation like that, especially when you have a mediocre quarterback like Mariota, because on the one hand, they would love Drake London to just take over the game and just dominate targets and be great. On the other hand, there's nothing really for the opposing defense to worry about other than Drake London. So a lot of times you'll see like inefficient performances, but that can still be really good for DFS. Like if they throw him the ball 15 times and he catches half of them, you're still having a good DFS game. So I thought the ceiling was really, really interesting, especially in Alex's case. And this goes back to something that we've talked about on previous shows. When you're looking at other people's exposures, you have to pay attention to what they did as a whole as well. Like you shouldn't necessarily draw the conclusion that Alex thought Drake London was absolutely one of the best wide receiver plays on the slate. Maybe he did. I don't know. But when you see how much Tampa Bay Alex had, that's going to pull up how much Drake London he gets as well. For me, I was over the field on London too. I just thought it was an interesting spot at relatively low ownership. I didn't get quite as much as Alex, but that's also because I wasn't playing a ton of Tom Brady like he was. So I thought it was a really high upside spot, lower probability, I think, than guys like Olave and Godwin and Lockett. And that's why the ownership played out how it did. But certainly a really high ceiling there. Made a ton of sense if you were going heavy on Tampa Bay.
We have the screen locked right now over on Mike's side, so we're going to continue talking through some of these ownerships, and you guys will just have to believe us that these are what these guys have. Over to the Colts we go. Jeff Wilson, his highest owned at 45%. Justin Jefferson, 42%. Let's go. I love a big stand on Justin Jefferson. A lot of people didn't want to get involved with the Minnesota Vikings because of perceived pace, because of perceived how are the Bears going to keep pace with them. Did a decent enough job. If you looked at the top of the boards in the first half, it was all Dalvin Cook. It was all Justin Jefferson. It was all skill players. Kirk Cousins started that game off 17 for 17. Is that real life? I don't think that's real life.
I didn't know that. That's insane.
I could not believe what I was witnessing. Marquez Callaway, Oh boy, 4.3% ownership. He ended up a lot lower owned than I was expecting. I didn't love it because I just don't love Andy Dalton, but I suppose you played a lot of Andy Dalton. We'll talk about him. Tyler Lockett, Leonard Fournette. Everything looks pretty good there. Irv Smith, that is a great stand too. 27.6%. I liked Irv Smith a lot yesterday, even if it didn't completely work out. 8.2 fantasy points. Tight end was wide open. He was cheaper. I thought if he falls in the end zone, you're in a really good spot with 15 out of him there. How does the Colts lineups look?
I think they look good. Okay, yeah, so he had 14% Kirk Cousins. I was gonna say, looking at that Jefferson and Irv Smith, I was thinking he probably had a good amount of Cousins. I love the Jefferson play. I think, a little bit over the field. But Josh and I had talked about him specifically in the morning, where it was just like, I love that Jefferson's not getting ownership here. I also think he's really difficult to get to, which is why he wasn't getting ownership, because you had Stephon Diggs for a little bit cheaper in obviously a great spot. You're going to, plenty of people are going to be pairing him with Josh Allen and all that. And then you have Kupp, who is just kind of a cheat code. So they kind of were like sandwiching Jefferson in price. And it's like, man, he's so good. And I love getting him at low ownership, but then also it's kind of difficult to get there. So I really like that play. One of the best wide receivers in the NFL, kind of just goes overlooked on a lot of DFS slates because of the reasons I just said. So really like that play. Callaway, again, I had a good amount. I didn't have as much as the Colts did, but he was just one of the few value receivers you could get to. He was low owned. You're just basically hoping to run good there. You're not expecting a lot out of it, but when it pays off really well, I think. So that was fine, I guess. Jeff Wilson, clearly I liked a lot. Yeah, I think his exposures pretty much look good.
Yep. Brandon Ayuk, 26% of Brandon Ayuk. That is wild.
Yeah, it looks like he was heavy on that game. Had a good amount of DJ Moore, had a lot of Jeff Wilson.
Don't mind it. Sometimes if you just can kind of pick the game that's going really, really under-owned, the number of times, it's just like leverage in baseball, right? Where if you can get to the game nobody else wants to play, or parts of it outside of just Jeff Wilson there, it's almost like Aaron Judge in some spots where he would end up being 20-something% owned. The rest of the Yankees would be 5% in a more difficult spot. But you got to look at it. Overall chances of success when it does pay off, you're going to get paid off nicely. And Tampa Bay did fail, which kind of opened up the entire board to other people.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Let's move over to Neil Orfield, Alvin Kamara, Leonard Fournette, Ramondre Stevenson, another Cowboys defense, fourth highest down there. Dalvin Cook, somebody we haven't talked about a lot, but kind of falls into that grouping of running backs. 7,300, 26 fantasy points. You were happy being overweight to Dalvin Cook. Nothing, regardless of results, would be something that you should be looking at negatively. Justin Jefferson, he was way up on to 20%. A lot of really good players overweight to Justin Jefferson. I don't know. You were barely there. So I guess you're a good player. I'll give you the edge just because you were 1.5% over. Congratulations. How do you feel about Neil Orfield's lineups?
Look good as well. But one trend I'm kind of noticing, and it's making me feel better about mine, because I had said that I thought maybe I played a little bit too chalky, but you're seeing, when you look at the overall exposures for like all these people we're looking at, the player names change, but you're seeing a trend where like they were heavy on relatively chalky players, like good plays, some different than others, but it's kind of reiterating what I was saying before, where like there was just like a lot of guys in that like 12 to 18% range, and I think a lot of good players are just getting over on some, under on the others, as opposed to just like fading everybody that was 15% owned.
All right, welcome to the main event. It's time. Rinpack, hello. Chris Godwin, 58%. Tom Brady, 54%. Carson Wentz, 46.4% Carson Wentz. 40% Vikings defense. 39% Curtis Samuel, which makes sense if you're playing 46% Carson Wentz. I talked about it earlier. Diami Brown, like nobody. We're talking 0.3% of human beings had Diami Brown. Dude ends up putting up 24.5% of him into his lineups. Tyler Conklin, 25%. Jaguars D, I loved that play. 35.5%. Glad he was on board with me there, at least. Breece Hall, 37%. We're back in the saddle again. It's beautiful to see Rinpack doing Rinpack things, isn't it?
Yeah. It really throws me off when we look at his exposures and he's not just jamming in like 12 total plays.
I know, but here's the thing. he's spreading it out, but he's also doing some fantastic, because Rinpack, for those who don't know, the man is almost like very right-brained and really thinks outside the box in a way that most people cannot. And he is very aware that there's going to be weeks he makes nothing, and then he's going to smash one of these weeks, and we're going to go through his lineups, and he's going to finish 1st, 3rd, 8th, 15th, 22nd. Like that's the way that it works every single season. This construction is kind of built towards that narrative, no?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think it's just a different approach than most 150 maxers take, and that doesn't make it right or wrong. It's like, obviously he knows what he's doing. But yeah, like somebody in chat said, with 150, shouldn't you mix it up more? Like most people choose to, but he's putting himself in a position where, like you said, if one of these games shoots out, in this case, specifically the Washington-Tennessee game, he's going to have a ton of shots at getting first, as opposed to, oh, well, I'm over the field, I have 10% instead of 5%. So like, cool, you still have a total of 15 chances to win if that game shoots out. So yeah, it's different approaches. It's a lot more like it's going to typically be a lot more volatile, I think, because you can very easily just have, all of your lineup bubbles on the left-hand side and you're not getting much of a return at all, as opposed to having a lot more days where like you're only losing 20%, but then, you're not necessarily having those massive slates either. So yeah, it's just a different approach, and really, really embracing volatility here.
Christopher Hooks, we crush NBA. Yeah, we do. When that NBA content coming next week, my friend, it is upon us. It's going to be glorious. And if Bryn Forbes can knock down threes, my Minnesota Timberwolves are going to be outrageous, and I can't wait.
Is he on the Wolves? I didn't even know that.
He's on the Wolves now, yeah. I almost went to the game last night. I just decided not to. So they were playing the Clippers here in LA.
I was going to ask if you saw John Wall doing John Wall things.
Was he doing John Wall things?
Oh, he had like 20 points and 3 assists in 20 minutes.
Yeah, it did. He's that Clippers team is outrageous. Like, how are they going to even get Terrence Mann on the floor this year?
I mean, I don't know who's on the team. I haven't paid any attention to basketball offseason.
Good talk. Glad we had it. Going over to Ship, my co-host, my partner in crime, my homie, my brother, my dog. Alvin Kamara, 49%. Leonard Fournette, 48%. Tyler Lockett, 38.7%. I hate you again. God. Chalky Tyler Lockett, Chris Olave. You play both of these dudes, 38.7%. Honestly, shame on you. Shame on your family. May the Locust.
Jeff Wilson too.
I hate your lineups. I hate you. I hate you.
I actually
out of everybody we just covered, I hate you. I hate you more than anybody.
I liked them a lot more this morning than I did yesterday, because I hadn't gone through. Like, I mean, obviously I liked them yesterday, but like I said, I kind of thought maybe I played a little bit too chalky.
You did.
Looking today, I don't think I did at all.
Cowboys defense, 22.7%. Jeff Wilson, congratulations, Luckbox. Andy Dalton, 21.8%. I will say.
Whoa. Luckbox, he ran for a billion yards.
I was kidding. Fuck off.
And got vultured twice by Kevin Coleman.
Shut up. We're fine. I was joking. Okay. I was joking. I love you.
I just wanted to point out that he basically was like Breece Hall.
No, he was just my big stand against. And again, the two things that went terrible for me in the afternoon slate that I needed to not have happen, the Cowboys and Jeff Wilson exploding, and they both did.
Yeah,
so
I had 100% Jeff Wilson on that slate. But that was also, I will say, again, an ownership thing where he was projected for like 35% and he was actually 70%. And not just by us, like just industry-wide.
Everywhere. Yeah, it was everybody. I wish there was vodka in here or something so I could feel less at the moment. Dallas Goedert, Cardinals defense, interesting one by you there. See, these are the things I like to look at. Marquez Callaway, you got way over the field on, well, just double the field, if you will, right? No, way over.
I mean, I don't know. I'm seeing 16%, but I know this shit's wrong.
Yeah, 15.3% is what I'm looking at. Yeah, there's a couple of them that just aren't populating completely correctly here. Juwan Johnson, you got to some of him. Well done by you. I thought he was a decent enough punt. Everybody was in play at the tight end position. He didn't get there. But I believe there were some winning lineups. I saw Juwan Johnson, because if you just punted off and you got to the right guys at the top, yay for life, you won money.
And one thing I want to point out with my exposures that is a counterpoint to your bitching about how much chalk I played. I was like 4x the field on Geno Smith on the other side of that Saints game. So
want a cookie?
So like I'm getting a lot of Kamara and Olave and Lockett, but a lot of my lineups had either 3% owned Geno Smith or 3% owned Andy Dalton that correlated with them. So I don't care what they're owned. I mean, I care what they're owned, but at their actual ownership levels, I don't care.
All right. And then 20, the board's just going to group it by the winning lineups here. So congratulations to Chelios. It sounds like Chris Chelios a little bit.
Yeah, that's how I've read it every time I've seen it.
Yeah, there you go. Shot of hockey starting Wednesday. His highest known player, Cade Otton, 7.8% ownership. He had 73.3% of him. Oh, daddy. 2,500. He was the basement. I thought he was in play for cash, actually.
I think if you weren't going Higby and cash, you probably should have gone Otton.
Say that again?
I think if you were not going to go Higby in cash, you probably should have gone Otton.
Correct. That's what I was saying. Getting to some of that. Just an absolute wild type of exposure here for him. But let me click back into it here. We always round out these shows talking through the Millie lineup. Do we have access to that here right now? Mike Lawrence pulling it up on the screen? Even just like grabbing his specific lineup? Can't share it. Okay. No biggie. Let me see what I can do here. See if I can find some way to pull it here. Probably not, more than likely. But anyway, we talked through all of his exposures. Yeah, he had Cade Otton, lots of Leonard Fournette, lots of Cowboys defense, as you could probably expect for a lot of that. But he finished first and he finished third. That's good work if you can get it. But the winning lineup, Josh Allen, Alvin Kamara, Leonard Fournette, Chris Godwin, Gabriel Davis, Tyler Lockett, Cade Otton, Breece Hall, and Cowboys D. The thing that stands out the most to me, 3 Tampa Bay Bucks without any other piece of that game. Talk me through that lineup.
So I thought it was really interesting because that's something that I typically block out when I build my lineups is I'll allow for like a running back and a wide receiver, but I'll typically not want 2 pass catchers without the quarterback, and I typically don't want 3 guys from the same team without the quarterback. But I actually had forgotten to set that rule on FanDuel and Yahoo yesterday, and the only lineup on FanDuel that I ended up having a sweat with was Fournette, Evans, Otton. It's kind of interesting to me. Like, again, I wouldn't have built that, but I'm also sort of seeing this lineup get hate on Twitter because of that, and it's like people like aren't very good at thinking through like why the rules that they create exist. I think that if you were going to specifically allow 3 guys from one team without the quarterback, this would be a spot where you can do it because tight end was so weak. Cade Otton's 2,500. He can be a good tight end play if he just catches like 5 passes. Like if none of the tight ends on this slate go off, and he just gets 5. If he gets 8 to 12 points, like he opens up enough for you. Godwin can have a good game at 5,900. Fournette at 6,900. Like they're all underpriced to where I think they could get there. The reason I still don't do it is just like the chances of Fournette and Godwin both having multiple touchdowns is really low. But this is at least like a defensible spot to play 3 guys from the same team. If you didn't set restrictions, it was just going to show up from a projection standpoint. So I still don't think it's great, but I don't mind it as much as I would in a lot of situations.
I will say also, if Josh Allen gets 2 rushing touchdowns and throws 2 touchdowns to Gabe Davis or does things of that nature, you still want to get to Josh Allen as your quarterback. So maybe it's one of those things where Tom Brady could put up 32 and Josh Allen puts up 39. But you got all the exposure. And if Leonard Fournette's the guy who completely hits out of everybody like he did, 35.9, that's coming on the ground probably mostly independent of Tom Brady. So with a punt and Leonard Fournette and an undervalued wide receiver with Chris Godwin, I kind of understand it. If it were Mike Evans, I would not understand it. So shame on you once again.
Yeah.
That was a joke,
Well, and the thing is too, like, the reason that I still prefer not to do it is like you look at this lineup, right? And it's like, okay, well, that could certainly still work. But like in this specific lineup, why wouldn't you rather have Olave instead of Godwin? Just because, obviously you have Kamara, but like
you have Lockett on the other side. You want to get to Olave. If you had put Olave in, he would have had more points.
Well, and I mean, you have Kamara. So like Olave was just the first guy in that price range that I thought of. But like, why wouldn't you want just like any other $5,800 receiver? Like Brandon Cooks, obviously he sucked, but like, if you get in this lineup, let's say Fournette has a big game, Cade Otton, is fine. you're probably just a little bit more likely to win by having like Brandon Cooks. Like Brandon Cooks is probably more likely to have a big game if you assume Fournette's having a monster game and Otten's having a good game than Godwin is. So like that's where the issue is for me. But also Godwin was cheap enough that I don't care that much. So not as glaring a mistake to me as it would be in a lot of circumstances.
I agree. We won't, because we can't pull it up. We're not going to go to the worst lineup from Chev Chelios. We would generally have that pulled up. But once again, the winning lineup: Josh Allen, Kamara, Fournette, Godwin, Davis, Lockett, Otten, Hall, Cowboys. Nobody under 7.5% owned in it. So very chalky compared to most Millie Maker lineups that you're going to see overall. Lots of really good plays kind of thrown together. All it takes, baby, 20 lineups. He took home 1.1, finished first and third. That is a hell of a showing in the Millie Maker for sure. 20 lineups to finish top 3 in 2 of them. 10% of your lineups. Pretty absurd stuff.
I do want to point out one other thing with.
Oh, sure.
So you mentioned that most of the guys, there was nobody really like super contrarian in this lineup, and that's something else that I had seen pointed out on Twitter. But again, keep in mind, like constructions can be contrarian too. Having the 3 Tampa Bay guys, while it's not ideal, people aren't building that. So like that's different. Having Allen with Davis and no run back. So one, a huge percentage of Josh Allen lineups are going to have Stephon Diggs. You don't have Stephon Diggs, you're already somewhat different in your Josh Allen lineup. I don't think you needed a Pittsburgh run back. You know, obviously you could, like it's fine one way or the other, but like a high percentage of Josh Allen lineups are going to have Deontay Johnson or Najee Harris or Pickens or whoever, Freiermuth. So like you're also just sort of different there. It's just, I think, and then also there were just a lot of like popular plays yesterday that aren't in this lineup. So it's to me, like it's all about relative, like comparing the lineups to other lineups too. Like, I don't know, there's nobody like super contrarian in this lineup, but it's also, all things considered, I don't think a super like chalky or popular lineup either. It
was like at the inception of Showdown when nobody was building 5-1s and you just do 5-1s because nobody else is doing it.
Right. Yeah. It's like it's a popular lineup. Like it's not like a crazy contrarian lineup or anything like that. But I think it's kind of just from what I've seen people saying about it, just being like overstated. Like people are just simply looking at the ownership percentages of who's in the lineup and not considering like what most Josh Allen lineups are going to look like.
The lineup that finished third is almost exactly what you said, though. It's Olave, Lockett, Davis. They have the Fournette and Otten. They don't have the Chris Godwin one in the middle of it. Pretty sure he doesn't care. He's on his way to Tahiti. His life is very good. Yeah. So, yay, Chelios.
Yeah, you're right. He did play like that lineup.
He like played that lineup. The only glaring difference between the two is the Jeff Wilson.
Yeah, 2v2.
He just worked out so well into lineups there.
Yeah, Olave. He went Olave over Godwin, Wilson over Hall. Like, to me, that is a better lineup, but they're obviously not that different. Like, Breece Hall was a really good play. Godwin independently was a really good play. I think you just sort of knock his projection down a little bit because of who else was in that lineup. But yeah, like if I had to just say which lineup I thought was better, I think his second place lineup was better than his first. But to me, they're both solid enough lineups.
I agree. Guys, that was the NFL lineup review show. It was a blast. Thank you so much to Prize Picks. Thank you so much to Mike Lawrence behind the virtual glass, doing a great job. Again, sometimes when you update some of the data and everything else the day after, things can look a little bit wonky from time to time, but feel like all of these lessons still apply. Ship, anything else you want the people to know as we get ourselves out of here?
Nope.
Cool. Good talk. Glad we had it. We've got tons of content coming up for you later in the day because Monday's Showdown, you know what's going on. We got the No House Advantage Monday show. That's Eitan and Jeff Ulrich. We've got NFL Showdown Deeper Dive. That's starting up at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Greg Ehrenberg and Neil Orfield. And to round it out, the law firm is in session, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, leading you up to lock. Matt Savoca, Makachevsky. Hit the like button, please, on the way out as we get out of here. Appreciate you all hanging out with us, talking through strategy. Hopefully you guys had a profitable week. If not, hopefully some of these things can apply to you next week. Looking forward to being back here, same time, same place on Monday, reviewing my Millie winner, because that's what's going to happen. He shit my money. He is a chalk donkey. I'm Eric. I'm not for once. We'll see you guys later. Have a good one.